Whether you think that objections are something to be handled or dealt with or simply responded to, they're a natural part of the selling process. When they come at the end of the sales process, they can become overwhelming and sometimes even sink a deal. But if you're paying attention, you'll notice that objections are being discussed all the time. They're just coming in the form of questions, not as no because statements. Hey everyone, I'm Ian Campbell. I'm CEO of Mission Suite. Before we jump into today's video, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so that you're notified every time that we post a new video. No matter what the objections are, they tend to boil down to one of 8 core objections. So what are they? Well, if you've watched some of my other videos, you've probably heard me talk about justsell.com. It's a great resource for salespeople and sales leaders alike, and it's one of those resources that I always highly recommend to people who are in sales. I'll drop a link to the website in the description of this video so that you can go and check it out. Just Sell has a great article on objections that I love, and I typically assign it as required study for all of my new salespeople. In that article, they boil every objection that you'll get into a list of 8 core objections. There's a link to this article in the description too, so you can check that out as well. If you know how to address these 8 core objections and know which ones aren't worth trying to respond to, then you'll be able to effectively discuss anyone's concerns about potentially doing business with you. Now, I'm not saying you're going to win every deal, but at least you'll be able to continue the conversation. Before I get into discussing this list of 8 core objections, it's important to remember that objections aren't stopping points, and typically they're not deal breakers. Rather, they're better to be thought of as conversation points, opportunities for you to show your value as a salesperson and to dial in on specific points of interest for the prospect that you're working with. Objections are nothing short of opportunities, so make sure that you treat them as such. Okay, so let's jump into that list. Number 1, they don't see your value. This is always a tough one to swallow as a salesperson. By the time that we're actually selling our stuff, we're usually so heavily bought into our offering that we can't imagine anyone not seeing the value in it, just like we do. This can be especially true if you're a professional service provider. Suddenly, when someone indicates that they don't see the value in what you're offering, it can become really personal. But if we can pull ourselves out of the equation and acknowledge that the sales process isn't actually about us, but rather it's about the prospect, it becomes a bit easier to swallow. If they don't see our value as a product or as a service offering, that's okay. Maybe they just need more information on you. Maybe they need to hear from some of your current clients. Maybe they just need more time. And of course, maybe they'll never see your value because of some sort of prejudgment that they've made, so you just need to move on and focus on the people who do see that value. The next one in our list is that there's just no urgency in buying from you. Now, I've said this in the past, timelines are a huge deal when it comes to closing deals. We've all got them, but the only ones that really matter are the prospects. Sure, there are always things that you might be able to do to successfully accelerate a timeline, depending on your business. If someone needs to buy something next month, maybe offering a special pricing concession that is good until the end of this month could make them move a bit faster. But a lot of these types of motivational tactics are pretty short-lived and they can't really be used regularly. It'll get pretty coincidental if you're offering the exact same deal or any deal every time someone says that they're not ready to pull the trigger. At that point, you may as well just lower your price and stop playing the games. There are also ways that you can create a sense of urgency by highlighting the opportunity cost of waiting. If they've told you what not having something like what you're offering in place is costing them, financially or otherwise, you may have a really clear picture on why this should be urgent for them. Once you understand that, you can actively make that a part of your conversation. It's a strong tactic, and I've used it and I've seen it work often, plenty of times. I'm a believer, though, that you're going to be much better off getting to know their timeline and why they have that timeline in place. Maybe they have a contract that they need to wait to let expire. Are they trying to hire someone who's going to be your primary point of contact? Maybe they're waiting to get paid from a client of theirs before they can pay you. Urgency is always nice when you can find it, and sometimes even when you can create it. And there are plenty of prospects out there who are actively looking for a solution like yours, and doing so very urgently. If you need sales now, keep working on finding those prospects. If you maintain a strong pipeline, though, you're not going to have to worry about creating urgency, and you'll be able to let the prospect's natural pipeline create the urgency itself. The next core objection on this list is that something else is just better. It might be something that they're doing themselves, or maybe they're using one of your competitors, but they've convinced themselves that there's an option that's better than yours. Now, again, I've talked about this in the past too. Sometimes we're just not the right fit, and we have to make ourselves okay with that. There will be times that the needs of your prospect are different than what you're able to offer, and that's okay. But what about those times that you know that you have a story to tell? You've got a great story against your competition, or maybe you know that you can provide a better option to the solution that they kind of cobbled together in-house. There are things that we can do once we've gained the trust of the prospect in these situations. First, you know you have plenty of competitive information and comparisons between you and your biggest competitors. And if you don't, well, you should really spend some time and put that together because it's important to have. Something as simple as a spreadsheet can be really effective at laying out the differences between you and your competition. Also, find clients or customers that you have who chose you over other offerings and ask them to be references for you. Write up a testimonial maybe, and make sure that it talks about why they decided to go with you over the others that they were looking at. Third parties really go a long way in helping you build that credibility. And once you have that credibility, then you can make a strong showing with more behind you than just your words. Next is internal politics. There's nothing worse than dealing with someone else's politics, but sometimes it needs to happen. So what's the best way to get around it? Well, it's important to make sure that you're involving everyone who will be a part of your deal into the conversation as early as possible. And how do you do that? How do you find those people? Well, ask. From the earliest points of your conversation with your primary contact at the company that you're working with, find out who else might need to be involved in something like this, right? Whatever it is, just find out who those people are. What other departments is this deal going to impact? Who else has the, quote, ear of the boss that could influence that final decision? Make sure that these people are involved in at least one conversation so that you can learn their needs and get their buy-in really early on. Politics become a problem when people are annoyed or frustrated because they feel like they weren't thought of. Show them otherwise. So what if the person that you're talking to insists that they're the only person that you need to talk to? That's rarely the case. So start asking them more questions. Ask them questions that they likely won't be able to answer without talking to Sam in marketing or whoever that person is. When you find that person, ask to speak with her as well to make sure that you can get all of your questions answered, right? That way your main point of contact doesn't feel like you're going behind their back. They don't feel like they've got to play middleman, and you get all of your questions answered. What's the hardest objection that you have to overcome in your sales day? Let us know down in the comments, and while you're down there, give us a thumbs up so that we know that you're actually getting something out of this video. This next one is one of my personal favorites, and that's that they just don't have any money. Now, the best things in life may be free, but that's not going to help you make quota. So you need to make sure that the person that you're talking to can actually afford what you're offering, otherwise you're wasting your time. The truth here, though, is that we can all afford what we need to buy that has the value that we need, right? What we're looking for. But because money is a finite resource, we also have to make choices about what we're spending it on. So unless you're talking to someone who is literally penniless, you just have to make the best case you can for why the value that you bring is worth spending it on you. Easier said than done, though, right? How do you go about showing that kind of value? Well, it's always going to depend on what you bring to the table, right? But there are a few things that you can do. Will what you're offering save them money? If so, then focusing on that savings could really go a long way in moving the needle. Maybe you're offering something that can help them actually make money. Well, that can be even more of a no-brainer for some people, although caution you that you need to be careful not to let expectations get out of control on this one. Maybe what you're offering will combine multiple tools into one. Usually that's going to allow your prospect not only to shift the resources that you're spending with all of those other tools and focus on just paying you, but oftentimes it's going to help them save that money and save time in managing all those different things. There are plenty of ways to keep the conversation going if a prospect thinks that they just don't have enough money to actually do business with you. Make sure you're ready to address that concern so that you can keep moving forward. And next we have personal issues. Sometimes, no matter how hard you try, a decision maker just is not going to move forward with you. Maybe they have an issue with the type of solution you're offering. Maybe you remind them of someone that they don't like. Maybe they ate some bad fruit and just aren't willing to hear you out. Maybe they just don't like beards. I don't know. The thing about being in sales is that as salespeople, we make our living on being liked, right? And it's tough when someone just clearly doesn't like us for some reason. I don't know about you, but in the past, I found myself thinking that if I just try a little bit harder, they'll like me, and then we can do business together. And sure, sometimes it's worked, but usually I've had to give up something to get there, and it's usually not worth it. For me, I find that if I sense that the decision maker has some sort of personal issue with me or with my offering, then it's probably just best to move on. Next thing to be ready for is that there's just something else going on with an outside company or someone else, an outside organization. Every now and then you're going to come across a prospect that's engaged a third party to assist them with something in the world in which you're working. This actually happens to me quite a bit as a CRM and marketing automation guy, so I'll use my own experience here as an example. I'll start a conversation with a prospect who seems really stoked on the marketing and sales automation aspects of Mission Suite. They're really excited to talk, and during our first conversation, they mentioned that they've also engaged an outside marketing firm that needs to be able to use whatever system they've decided to work with. Now, right off the bat, this is actually a pretty great opportunity for me because I get to underscore our competitive advantage that Mission Suite does not charge for additional users, so they can access the CRM without having to pay extra for that license. However, this marketing company, they may have their own preferred CRM that they try to implement with all of their clients. Or maybe the marketing company has final sign-off on whatever system they decide to use and needs to see another demo of Mission Suite before the prospect moves forward. Now, more often than not, it's still the prospect's decision at the end of the day on which platform to move ahead with. So I can still make my case as to why they should go with Mission Suite, but this third party is always going to be an influencer in that decision. Now, in your world, it may not happen often, or maybe just not as often, but there are plenty of times when it could just become par for the course. So make sure you know how to address this when it happens. And finally, it's just safer to maintain the status quo. I have to say that of all of the objections that I get, the idea that I think we're better off just sticking with what we have is the one that probably frustrates me the most. If a prospect is content with what they're currently working with, that's fine, but if that's the case, then why are we going through this sales process together? Change is never easy, and no matter how many times we've read Who Moved My Cheese, change in your working environment absolutely does not get any easier. And that's true for all of us, and it's easy to forget that the prospect that you're working with is probably feeling that too. There's always going to be apprehension over the idea of implementing a different system or bringing in another service provider to do something differently. But something brought them to the table. It's your job to find out what brought them to the conversation in the first place and to truly understand the impact of that so that you can position yourself to an answer to that pain. Then if the person that you're talking to starts to indicate that they might just maintain the status quo, gently remind them why they're talking to you in the first place. Now, as always, I really hope that you got something out of this video. And if you did, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up, maybe give it a share so that others can see it too. That really helps with the YouTube algorithm. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so that you're notified every time that we post a new video. And while you're at it, check out these videos as well. And we'll see you next time around. Cheers.